It remembers, waiting for you.
The shadow of Devil's Rest Lake. There's a place in northern Ontario that most maps don't name anymore. A place avoided by locals and erased from tourist guides. They call it Devil's Rest, Lake-O-Wide. Still body of water surrounded by black pines and shrouded in silence. It earned its name long ago, after stories of missing hunters, drowned campers, and strange lights on the water spread through the surrounding towns. Those who know the legends say the lake never gives up its dead. Instead, it keeps them, dragging their shadows back to shore long after their bodies are gone. I came to Devil's Rest in the summer of 2018. I was a photographer chasing remote landscapes, looking for something wild and untouched to capture. The lake's reputation intrigued my locals, spoke of it only in whispers, and the half-forgotten folklore was too tempting to ignore. Don't camp by the water. An old shopkeeper warned me as I stocked up on supplies, and don't look too long at your reflection. The lake, it remembers. He refused to say more, only muttering as I left. It doesn't like strangers. It took me half a day to reach the shoreline, hiking through dense forest where the canopy blocked the sun and every sound seemed muffled, as though I had stepped into another world. When the trees finally broke, I saw the lake stretched out before me, a mirror of black glass, so still it seemed frozen. Not a ripple disturbed its surface, not even from the wind. I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, as if the air itself resisted me being there. I set up camp a little back from the water, but that night I couldn't sleep. The silence was too deep, too unnatural. No crickets, no owls, not even the faint hum of insects. Only the occasional drip of water somewhere in the dark. I lay awake, listening, until I finally drifted into a shallow, uneasy sleep. I woke just after midnight. At first, I thought it was a dream, the sound of footsteps outside my tent, slow and deliberate, crunching against pine needles. My heart hammered as I held my breath, waiting. The steps paused right outside, then moved away, toward the lake. Against every instinct, I unzipped the flap and peered out. The night was black, the lake darker still, but there just at the shoreline I saw a figure. It stood motionless, talanting its body no more than a silhouette against the water. At its feet, the lake rippled faintly, though no wind stirred. I blinked, and the figure was gone. The surface stilled again, smooth as glass. I told myself it was exhaustion, a trick of the mind. But the next day, when I walked to the water's edge, I saw prints in the mudlong. Narrow impressions that sank too deep, as though whatever had stood there was impossibly heavy. I should have left then. Every instinct screamed to pack my gear and go. But the pull of the lake was stronger. I told myself I had come for photographs, for proof of something forgotten. By dusk, I had set up my tripod at the shore, aiming across the black water as the sun died behind the trees. As darkness spread, I noticed something strange. My reflection in the lake didn't move as I did. When I raised my camera, the figure in the water only stared back at me, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. I froze, lowering the camera. Slowly, my reflection followed, its movements jerky, delayed by seconds. My skin crawled. Then, behind my mirrored self, I saw another. A shadow darker than the water itself rose from the depths, a shape without features, stretching upward until it loomed taller than any man. Its edges bled into the lake like smoke in water, yet its form was unmistakable. It leaned forward, pressing close behind my reflection, as though whispering into its ear. The surface rippled violently. I stumbled back, tripping on the roots, but when I looked again, the lake was calm, empty. Only my reflection remained. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat awake by the dying fire, watching the water through the trees. Several times, I thought I saw something moving along the shore too, tall, too thin, gliding rather than walking. At one point, the faint sound of breathing seemed to come from just behind my tent, long and steady, matching the rhythm of the lake's waves. But when I turned, there was nothing. By morning, my nerves were shredded. I decided I would take one last photo and leave. As I packed my gear, I noticed something that froze me to the core. Footprints again, pressed deep in the mud, but this time they circled my tent. Still, I made the mistake of going back to the water. The air was heavy, pressing down like a storm about to break. I lifted my camera, framing the horizon. For a moment, everything was still. Then, as the shutter clicked, the lake erupted. From the water rose shapes, dozens of them, shadows dragging themselves upward. Faceless, limbless forms, writhing in silence. Their bodies rippled like liquid, their edges dissolving into mist. One by one, they stood, lining the shore, and though they had no eyes, I felt them watching me. My reflection writhed on the surface, no longer matching me, its mouth stretched open in a silent scream. I dropped the camera and ran. Branches whipped my face as I tore through the forest, the weight of unseen footsteps following close behind. No matter how far I went, I heard them wet, heavy, dragging, closing in. I don't know how I made it back to the road. When I stumbled into town, covered in mud and shaking, people stared but said nothing. The shopkeeper who had warned me only nodded grimly when he saw my state. "It followed you," he said quietly. "It always follows." I left Ontario the next day, abandoning my gear, my tent, even my camera by the roadside. But even now, years later, I know the lake has not let me go. At night, when I glance into mirrors or dark windows, I sometimes see it behind me, the shadow, tall and faceless, leaning close. And sometimes, in the silence between dreams, I hear water dripping, slow and steady, as though it's waiting for me to return.
Come! Help me down here. Daniel, come back.
The whispers beneath Hollow Creek. There is a place in the backwoods of Kentucky, far from the main roads, hidden among dense pine and oak forests, where even the locals refuse to linger after sunset. The place is called Hollow Creek, a narrow stream that winds through a valley so deep it rarely sees the sun. Old-timers whispered that it was cursed long before white settlers came, that the land itself breathes with a hunger, swallowing those who dare disturb its silence. For most, Hollow Creek is just a name on an old map, a forgotten patch of wilderness. But for those who have wandered too close, it is a place where the line between the living and the dead dissolves, where voices rise from the water and the trees, bend in ways they shouldn't. I first heard of Hollow Creek when I was a teenager. My grandfather, a hard man who rarely spoke of anything beyond his farm, told me about it one winter night. His voice was low, almost reluctant, as if he feared speaking the name too loudly. He told me of a time, back in the 1930s, when 3 children from a nearby town went missing. They had been playing near the creek, their laughter carrying through the trees, when, according to the last person who saw them, they suddenly went silent. Search parties scoured the woods for weeks. Dogs were brought in, lanterns lit, prayers whispered, but no trace was ever found, no clothing, no footprints, no bodies. It was as though Hollow Creek had swallowed them whole. "The creek don't just take," he said. "It whispers first. If you hear it call your name, boy, you turn and run. Don't you ever answer." At the time, I dismissed his words as nothing more than a scary story meant to keep kids from wandering too far. But years later, when I was in my 20s, I decided to see Hollow Creek for myself. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, and mine was relentless. I packed a flashlight, a notebook, and a camera, determined to prove to myself that it was only a story, that the whispers were nothing but imagination. The journey there was unsettling from the start. The road narrowed until it was little more than a dirt path, swallowed by trees that arched overhead like twisted ribs. The deeper I drove, the quieter the world became. Birds fell silent. Insects ceased their buzzing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. By the time I reached the valley, night was falling. The creek itself was barely visible in the fading light, a thin ribbon of water glinting between black trees. I set up camp near the bank, determined to spend the night. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The forest was still, heavy with the scent of wet leaves and moss. I wrote in my notebook, sketched the outline of the creek, and listened to the faint gurgle of water over stone. Hours passed in silence, until, near midnight, I heard it the first whisper. It was soft, almost lost in the trickle of the creek. A single word. My name. I froze. My grandfather's warning came back to me with sudden clarity. The sound hadn't come from behind me, or across the trees. It had come from the water itself. I told myself it was imagination, fatigue, the mind's trick in the dead of night. But then it came again, clearer this time. A low, breathless call. Daniel. The air grew colder. I shone my flashlight across the creek, but the beam caught only the mist rising from the water, swirling like pale smoke. My pulse quickened. I told myself not to answer, but the instinct to respond was overwhelming, as though the sound carried not just my name, but a pull, a command buried deep in my bones. The whisper shifted, no longer just my name, but fragments of sentences. Broken, please. Help me. Down here, please. The voice was childlike, trembling with fear. I felt my stomach twist. Could it be one of the missing children? Some echo trapped in the land. I took a step closer to the bank, the mud sucking at my boots. The water rippled as if disturbed by something unseen. Suddenly I saw them. Shapes beneath the surface small, pale hands pressing upward against the thin skin of the creek. Fingers stretched, clawing at the surface, but the water never broke. Their faces appeared faintly below, eyes wide, mouths moving soundlessly, bubbles escaping like breathless cries. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but the whispers rose louder, overlapping now, dozens of voices, all calling, pleading, begging. The forest groaned around me, branches bending as if under a great weight. The air thickened, pressing on my chest. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it wildly, and for a moment I saw them standing among the trees. Children, dozens of them, their eyes hollow black voids, their mouths open in silent screams. And then, just as quickly, they were gone, leaving only the whispering creek behind. I ran. My tent, my gear, my notebook, I left it all. The path twisted, the trees closing in, as if the forest itself tried to keep me from leaving. The whispers followed, no longer just from the creek but from the branches, the shadows, the very ground beneath my feet. My legs burned, lungs aching, but I did not stop until I saw the glow of my car headlights in the distance. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, and sped away without looking back. For weeks after, I could still hear it. At night, when the house was quiet, the whisper of my name would curl through the darkness. I stopped sleeping. I stopped answering the phone, fearing the voice on the other end might not be human. I burned my shoes, the ones that touched the mud of Hollow Creek, hoping it would sever whatever tie I had carried home. But it did not. The towns near Hollow Creek still tell their stories. Some say the creek is bottomless, a wound in the earth that leads to somewhere not meant for the living. Others claim it is a graveyard for souls abandoned, that each whisper is a lost spirit trying to drag another into its depths. I do not know which is true. I only know that I heard it, that it followed me, and that it waits still. Sometimes, when the night is especially still, I wake to the sound of water trickling in my room, though there is no leak, no pipe, no explanation. And then I hear it, my name, whispered low and soft, rising from the darkness just beyond my bed. I squeeze my eyes shut, clench my fists, try to block it out, but it does not stop. It never stops. I understand now what my grandfather meant. The creek does not just take, it calls first. And once you hear it, you can never truly leave. Hollow Creek becomes a part of you, a shadow beneath your skin, a whisper that waits for the silence. And one day, when I am weak enough, tired enough, or foolish enough to answer, I know it will finally claim me too.
Help, please.
Come closer.
Just a little further.
The Lantern Man of Duskmoor Fen. There are places in England that seem untouched by time, places where the modern world feels impossibly far away. Duskmoor Fen is one of them, a stretch of marshland on the edge of Norfolk, where the air is thick with mist and the ground swallows your footsteps whole. For centuries, locals have warned travelers not to cross the fen after sunset. They say the lanterns will appear then, swaying in the distance, leading the lost deeper into the bog. And if you follow them, you will never return. I had heard the story many times, always told with a nervous laugh around the pub table. The Lantern Man, they called him, a pale figure who carried a swinging light through the mist. Some claimed he was a drowned soul, cursed to lure others to their deaths. Others whispered he was older than memory itself, a spirit born of the fen, with no beginning and no end. To most, it was folklore tale for frightening children and warning drunks off the marsh. But when I moved to Norfolk for work one bleak winter, I learned quickly that the fear was real. It was the landlord of my rented cottage who first warned me. He was a stout man with hands like weathered oak, and when I mentioned going for walks to explore the fen, his face darkened. "Don't wander at night," he said, "and if you see a light in the mist, don't follow it, not even if it calls your name." He would not explain further, only muttered that the land kept what it wanted. 4 weeks. I obeyed his warning. The fen was eerie enough in daylit stretches of pale grass, stagnant pools reflecting gray skies, and reeds that rattled like bones in the wind. But there was a strange beauty to it too, and it pulled at me. By late January, when the days were short and the nights seemed endless, I found myself restless. One evening, after too much cheap whiskey and too little sense, I wrapped myself in a coat, lit my lantern, and walked toward the fen as the last light bled from the horizon. The path was narrow, half swallowed by mud. My boots squelched with each step, the air thick and damp against my skin. Mist curled low across the water, rising higher the further I went, until it clung to my waist like grasping fingers. The silence was suffocating. No birds, no insects, not even the rustle of wind through grass. Only my breathing, and the faint creak of the lantern's handle in my grip. I don't know how long I walked before I saw it. At first, I thought it was a reflection of my own light, flickering on the mist. But no, the glow was ahead of me, faint and golden, swaying gently as though carried by unseen hands. My breath caught. It was exactly as the stories had said. A lone lantern, moving with purpose, vanishing into the fog, then reappearing a little further on. I stood frozen, every instinct screaming to turn back. But then I heard it. A voice, faint and hollow, drifting through the mist. "Help, please." The words were broken, trembling, like someone calling from underwater. I gripped my lantern tighter. Perhaps it was another traveler, lost in the fen. Perhaps it was a trick of sound. Either way, I told myself I couldn't just walk away. I followed. The light led me deeper, the ground growing softer beneath my boots, sucking at every step. The mist thickened, curling into shapes that almost looked like faces, eyes hollow and wide. The voice came again, closer now. This way, just a little further. My pulse hammered in my ears, but I kept moving, drawn by the lantern's glow. It was then I saw him. At first, he was only a shape in the fog, tall and gaunt, with shoulders bent beneath a tattered coat. His hand gripped a lantern that swung slowly, casting long shadows across the reeds. But as I drew closer, the details emerged. His face was pale as bone, stretched tight across sharp cheekbones. His eyes were black voids, reflecting no light, and when he opened his mouth, no sound came, though I heard the voice in my head as clear as thought itself. "Come closer." My body locked in place. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet my legs would not obey. The lantern swung in his hand, side to side, hypnotic, each arc pulling me forward like a tide. The mud sucked at my boots, the ground sinking deeper, water rising cold around my ankles, and all the while, the voice pressed against my skull, urging, coaxing, demanding, closer, closer, just a little further. I don't know how I broke free. Perhaps it was fear, perhaps some last flicker of sense. I forced my legs backward, tearing my boots from the muck with a wet sucking sound. The figure's head tilted, almost in curiosity, and then the light vanished. Darkness swallowed the fen. The voice ceased, and I was alone. The path back was a nightmare. The mist twisted around me, the reeds brushing against my arms like skeletal hands. Moretan once. I thought I saw lanterns swaying at the edge of my vision, waiting for me to slip, to follow again. My breaths came in ragged gasps, and more than once I nearly lost the path entirely. But at last, after what felt like hours, I stumbled onto firmer ground, the dark outline of my cottage barely visible through the fog. I slammed the door shut, dropped the lantern, and collapsed on the floor, shaking. The silence pressed in heavy, but I knew I had not left the fen behind. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, I saw a faint glow through the cracks of my window. It swayed slowly, back and forth, casting no shadow. I pulled the curtains closed, heart hammering, and tried not to listen. But even with the windows shut, I heard it. The faint creak of a lantern handle, swinging in the night. The locals never questioned my silence about the fen. They could see it in my eyes. Some nodded knowingly, others crossed themselves, whispering prayers under their breath. I never admitted what I saw, never dared speak it aloud, but the fear never left me. Even now, years later, when I live far from Norfolk, I sometimes see it. A flicker of light in the corner of my vision when I walk at dusk, a faint glow in the distance across fields or down empty lanes. Always swaying, always waiting. And when I close my eyes, I hear it still, the hollow voice in my head, soft and relentless, just a little further. And I know that one night, whether by chance or by weakness, I will follow it again. And 'tis time I will not return.